Everyone around us seems chronically tired, but it doesn't have to be that way. You've probably seen so many videos on the perfect nighttime routine, but today I want to give a straightforward approach to how to wind down before bed, get a great night's sleep, and conquer the next morning in 2 simple steps. Step 1 is avoiding the bad, and step 2 is doing the good. But what does that even mean? Avoiding the bad means avoiding things that wake our brain up before bed or excite our brain. Essentially, stimulate brain waves, stimulate the reward centers in our brain, activate our sympathetic nervous system, which triggers our fight or flight response, anything that really wakes us up before bed. And we want to avoid anything that activates any of these systems in our brain because it makes it harder for us to fall asleep and then stay asleep throughout the night. It's important to fall asleep close to when we climb into bed and stay asleep throughout the night because we often overestimate how much sleep we're actually getting. In order to really get 8 hours of sleep, most people need to be in bed for probably 8.5 to 9, maybe even 9.5 hours to account for the amount of time that it takes to fall asleep and to account for the amount of time that we're actually waking up throughout the night. So step 1, what are the things that we want to avoid at night? The first thing that's most important is avoiding bright lights or blue light. Avoiding blue light before bed is really important because what blue light does is it sends daytime light signals to our brain. When our eyes see blue light, our brain interprets that as, okay, it's daytime, let's stay awake, let's hold off falling asleep, and it reduces the amount of natural melatonin that our body is going to produce. And this blue light is especially powerful when it's combined with a fast-paced media like social media, especially any short-form content. Increasing our brain stimulation through any sort of social media, any sort of short-form content, even long-form content that's just bouncing around all over the place, it activates these sensory and emotional response systems in our brain. Social media by nature is made to be engaging. That's the whole point of it. I want to engage you with this video. And through engaging the mind, social media is activating someone's reward system in their mind. Especially with short form content, you've probably heard people talk about dopamine and dopamine receptors and how social media can provide a false sense of dopamine. So this isn't a similar idea, but in the idea that the more social media and the more things that are popping us in front of us, it's telling our brain that we're doing something. And essentially, in the context of falling asleep, it tells our brain to stay awake. The more social media that we look at and the more we scroll around on our phone, even if we're not on a technical social media app, and we start doom scrolling on anything, the more our brain thinks it's time to wake up because it needs to be ready to do something because the dopamine receptors, the reward systems in our brain are being activated. So the best way to avoid activating the wake up part of our brain when we want to rest and we want to be able to fall asleep soon is to put our phones, to put our devices, turn off the TV, turn off our laptop, turn off all these things 30 minutes to really an hour before bed if we can. Also, we want to avoid drinking liquids and eating meals too close to bed. If we eat a big meal too close to bed, that doesn't allow our body the proper amount of time to fall asleep. And if we're drinking liquids too close to bed, then we're going to be waking up throughout the night needing to use the bathroom. Or we might be stuck in a weird zone of we keep getting woken up, but we're so tired that we'll fall back asleep and then keep waking up because part of our body needs to use the bathroom, and then the other part of our body is super tired and needs to fall asleep. And we end up in this weird, not restful state. Generally, a good recommendation is to eat an earlier dinner and try to stop eating and drinking 3 hours before bed if one can. But this is going to be different depending on each person, so you may need to experiment a little bit with what works better for you. So now for step 2. If we know that doing activities that wake our brain up and trigger more brain signals and trigger the reward systems in our brain is bad for us before bed, then what should we be doing to wind down before bed? The first step is to simulate a nighttime environment. The best way to do this is 1, put your devices down as early before bed as possible. That way it's not activating our minds with bright lights, but then also dim the lights in your environment, in your room, in your house, as much as you can. Make it so that your environment is not so bright. This will also signal to our brain that it's becoming nighttime and it's time to go to bed. If you can turn off your lights 30 minutes to again about an hour before bed, that's going to be ideal. But as far before bed as you can to really let your body wind down into night mode. Another great way to wind down the body and mind before bed is to either do some sort of reading or journaling. Reading directs our focus outward towards the book that we're reading, and it really helps us to take our mind off of any sort of daily stressors, any sort of activities that are going on in our mind. Reading also helps us slow down our mind because we can't read as fast as we can think if we have racing thoughts going on in our head. So partially it can distract us from any sort of rumination or any sort of stressors that are going on, but also it forces our mind to slow down. Journaling works in a similar way, in that when we write things down, we have to go slower than our thoughts are going, especially if we do what's called a brain dump, where we dump everything from our mind out onto a paper. Then we're taking all of our stressors, all our anxiety, all our worries that are being held within our mind, and we're putting them out onto a piece of paper. This can help be a big calming technique. This can help prevent any sort of rumination or stressful thoughts and stressful feelings that are going on before bed, and it helps us make sense of what's going on. Oftentimes, one of the most painful emotions to experience is confusion, and this confusion can sort of be subconscious when we have so much going on in our mind that we need to make sense of, and journaling is a great way to do this, that we can take some of this confusion and make sense of what we're thinking and what we're feeling. Other things that you can do before bed that will promote restfulness is doing any sort of meditation or breathing techniques, or listening to slower tempo music usually without lyrics and something that's actually really calming. These activities activate our parasympathetic nervous system, which is essentially the part of our mind that's responsible for calming the body down and sending out rest and relaxation signals to the rest of the body. Ultimately, getting a great night's sleep, being prepared for the next day, it really comes down to this two-part system. Most things in life kind of come down to this two-part system, but you want to remove the bad things that are keeping you awake and preventing you from achieving your goal, which in this case is getting a good night's sleep, and you want to implement the good. That way you can do things that will promote restfulness in this case. I encourage you to take the tips from this video, implement it into your nighttime routine, and I'm curious to hear in the comments what you guys have done to improve your sleep, improve your nighttime routine, and sleep better. If you're looking on continuing to improve your energy and get a better night's sleep, I encourage you to subscribe to the channel, like the video, share it with someone who you think may benefit from it, and remember to hit life on all cylinders.